Hey everybody, it's Safi and Marco, dish out on the movies. And today we are doing a review of
Leprechaun in Space.
Children of the Corn 2, The Final Sacrifice.
Oh, I watched the wrong movie then. Good job, Safi.
You said I clicked on the thing you sent me. What are you talking about? He's lying. It came out in 1992, but it could have been filmed yesterday, except for the cars.
Oh, really, Safi?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No cell phones though, and older cars.
It did feel like a modern horror movie. It didn't really feel like a classic 80s or 90s horror movie.
And this is 1992.
Well, the 90s was a pretty bad decade for horror. I mean, that's when the horror genre really started to go downhill, because they started making everything more teenage oriented, and they started toning down everything that was really hardcore in the 80s, and then in the 2000s it was just fully teenage crap. So that was really the big reason of why the horror genre started dying.
But this was closer to the 80s though, because it was the very early 90s.
It's targeting teens. It's like you can tell that this movie, like what kind of an adult would sit down and watch this movie and get scared, or say like, ooh, wow, that was a really hardcore kill. Like, let's just talk about the movie, Safi. Are you ready? You ready to talk about it?
Okay, well, they start off actually...
No, you want to explain the movie. You're not doing that. You're not going to pull that again. Ever again.
Okay, well, this is Children of the Corn 2.
Yeah, so
it's supposed to come off from the first one, although none, as far as I know, none of the actors who were in the first one were in the second one. So Marco may disagree with me, but I didn't recognize anybody.
The problem is that they don't really explain what is going on. Like, they show all these kids, and apparently I guess they all killed the parents, and I guess they were a part of the Children of the Corn from the first movie, but they don't really properly explain, like, where is this? What is going on here? Like, I was really, like, confused of, like, is this just they erased the first movie, kind of, or they're just kind of taking what they want from it to make the second movie story? Well, because they don't really explain.
Well, they did mention...
They just show kids.
Well, they mentioned one sentence about the couple from the first movie, coming across, and I don't know, getting into this big, I don't know what you want to call it, war with these kids, and that they found their 50 bodies. That's what they were doing at the beginning of this movie, digging them out. Then the kids get on the bus one by one, and the doctor gives them, which I thought was funny, the doctor gives them each a lollipop after he checks their throats. I thought that was really weird.
It was weird
and stupid.
That's what, like, starts off the movie.
Yeah.
And it's a really weird beginning, because...
And they don't do any explaining. Like, the one thing about the couple, that was like one line.
Well, you think about, too, after the first movie, the events of the first movie, there's no way in hell that it's like, oh, these kids just... they go on a school bus and then they get sent to all these new parents or something. Like, the way that the events of the first movie were handled was really piss poor. Like, after that couple, they talked and told about what happened at this place. This is all that happens, Safi? Like, this is a big deal that went on. And so it just doesn't feel at all like it's attached to the first movie, even though that's what it's trying to do.
Well, I don't know how they could do that when they don't have any of the actors from the first movie.
Well, because they were saying, like, these are the bargain bin kids. Like, they said, oh, they already killed the main bad kids from the first movie, so these kids, they're not so bad. And it's like, oh, so they're the bargain bin. Like Children of the Corn 1, that was Team A. This is Team
B. This is the B team.
B. and they really act and look like the B team as well. Like, right off the bat, there's a kid and he's got black hair and he's got black clothing, and you can tell, oh, he's going to be the main kid because he looks like Isaac
And
a little bit.
Nobody can replace Isaac.
Yeah.
Isaac was, in fact, Isaac and who's the other guy?
Malachi.
I was thinking Jedediah, but Malachi.
Well, in the second movie, it's Mordecai. Ooh.
Lots of Kais. Well, they were so unique and they just stuck out and unique and interesting, and even though they were horrible villains, but still, you can't replace them.
No.
You have to have somebody new, a unique new villain.
You have to do something interesting.
Yeah.
Instead of just saying, oh, look, there are these kids that were left over. I mean, they're fucking leftover kids. They're like, not even like that. Like, they emphasize that too. They're like, oh, these kids, they're the ones that were left over. There's nothing that's bad with them. And
they go on
like,
this bus, and you think, and I think they said, like you said, that they were like fostered out in different homes. We never never saw that. Never.
Yeah,
saw
you did. The
did?
black hair kid, he goes to that bed and breakfast.
I thought that was his sister.
It was?
That's what I thought.
Was it? I don't know. It wasn't explained. See, this is what we're talking about. Like, it starts off, and I will say, like, there were some great ideas in the movie for a Children of the Corn sequel. Like, if it was written better and it was made better, it would have been a really good horror movie. But it was a poor execution, and a lot of the writing was bad as well. I mean...
And it's a shame, because it's almost like maybe they were afraid to outdo the first one. Which, why not? Because it's later years, different actors, and like Marco said, they could have, made it their own and made it even better. And it's like new and improved. Like it's later in the years, so it should be new and improved. They knew what didn't work or what could be better from watching the first one. So it's like that Tom Cruise movie. They looked at the old movie, and the person was very talented, and they worked together to make a new and improved and modern, which it followed because it was later, so it made things. He was older, and he had different responsibilities than what he would have had when he was younger. But I hate to go into that, but that's an example of people who looked at the first movie and said, maybe we could do this instead, or improve upon this, and really paid attention and been creative. And it's almost like people are afraid when they do a sequel
I don't know why you'd be afraid of Children of the Corn.
I don't either, but I mean, it's like they don't want to outdo or be seen as outdoing the first one. And it's really weird, because I've watched all the Harry Potter movies, and they're all different, directed by different people.
No.
Some people have good things to say about some and not so good things to say about the others for all kinds of reasons. But I never heard this, where somebody was afraid to outdo the one before it. They would they kind of like go up and down. And I just don't see, you've got a horror movie. I don't understand, this is the early 90s too. Marco said this is a bad decade for horror.
It was,
but
because
this is the beginning of the decade. You think it would
teenage.
You think they would kind of carry over the positive things from the earlier decade into the next one, at least at the beginning.
Because the problem is that, and it's just like with everything else, where there was like a segment of people who had a different opinion about the good horror decade.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, there are all these people like Siskel and Ebert, and they called horror movies sexist, and they said that they're all about like seeing women get hurt or something. Like, it's really weird, bizarre delusions that these feminists come up with to try to attack things that they don't like, and you know, stuff like that. And then you had like the Friday the 13th movies, where they were really popular, but a lot of them were heavily censored, and because people didn't know about it and they didn't complain, it was like, oh, that's going to become the normal, where, oh, we really can't do very much violence, so let's just not hardly do anything at all. And so they did less and less in terms of violence too. And so it's like there were all these problems in the 80s that just grew and grew and grew, which is sort of like when we review these TV shows and they never get the feedback, and so it just gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
So that's what happened.
Well, although there was lack of some explanation certain places, like at the beginning, you're thrust into the activity. They're digging up or exhuming or pulling out 50 bodies.
Dead bodies.
From the bottom of a whatever, I don't even know what it was.
Yeah, they didn't even explain that. Like, it was just like
a barn or
no explanation.
They didn't even show the whole building.
Yeah.
So you didn't even know what they were pulling the 50 bodies from. They were from the bottom, like they'd been underneath the building, and how they knew. I guess the couple from the previous movie told them to go look under.
No, they said that the old woman from the second movie told them to.
Okay, yeah, there was two
the
women.
The old woman who yells a lot.
Right. There's two old women. They're sisters, and they're in this movie, and they're like the whistleblowers. And the first, they kill both of them, and in fact, well, they kill all the adults in the town. The only there's only one person in the end. There's only one adult left, because they were having a town meeting and they burned. It was like The Patriot with Mel Gibson.
Safi, stop spoiling other movies that have nothing to do with this.
Oh, I know that, but that's what it reminded me of, where they went to all the entrances, the windows, everything, and they burned them all alive.
Safi, don't do that.
So anyway,
it starts off with like a really good idea of where the kids are just, they're not really taking it seriously because they're children, and so you know that there's going to be this suspense of like, oh, the kids are obviously, they're going to kill everyone again.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to, you know, do all the same shit. And it's like, that was kind of like a good, scary idea. And you didn't know how it was going to happen or anything. But they didn't investigate anything from the first movie, like, at all.
No.
Or something like it. But it started off, I would say the first 30 to 40 minutes was the best part of the movie. And then everything after that was garbage. Even though the first, 40 minutes wasn't that great, well, it still had good ideas.
They killed, well, it wasn't the kids, but, there's supposed to be this monster in the cornfield, and when it appears, all you really do is the screen turns, gets into red hues.
Well, that was another thing, too, and they didn't show the monster this movie.
Mm-mm.
which I thought that was good. At the same time, they had this stupid CGI lightning that kept on, like, I guess the monster could shoot lightning and it would electrocute. I thought that looked bad as well. So they should have just not had any lightning and just stuck with the red screen. Because I thought that was a good idea.
Well, they killed 2 journalists who weren't even from the area.
Yeah.
They went into the corn. I don't know why he wanted to get a picture of the corn.
No, they wanted to get a picture of, like, the meeting area where the kids would go and they'd have their meetings. Duh.
Well, they did find it. And they go in there, and then all of a sudden what happened? They got out of the car.
They get killed. They just
I know they got killed, but
there's
they
a
see
corn
this
cob,
cloud.
or there's a corn stalk that flies into the car and impales one guy.
Well, the other guy went out in the field.
Yeah,
and the monster.
Some stuff happened.
So they got killed right off the bat.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why it jumped right into what was going on. But that was kind of weird, because you're talking about the kids. You do wonder, like in the first one, after all that happened,
what happens?
Isaac gets killed and all that stuff, or he gets taken into the cornfield. Who knows?
Well, in the first one, it felt like the kids were, like, all deprogrammed by the end of the movie, or for the most part. Yeah. Like, it didn't really feel like this, where the kids are like...
They're all, at least nothing happened to them. They're all the same.
Yeah.
In other words, they haven't learned anything. They haven't, there's no remorse. There's no, they just immediately regroup. It's a cult.
Yeah.
And that's what it reminded me of too. And I guess the guy with the black hair, who pretended like he was Isaac, or they pretended like he was Isaac.
Well, he's the Isaac stand-in. He's Isaac Light.
He's Isaac Dot too.
It's exactly like when you have a Coca-Cola and you have a Diet Coca-Cola.
Oh, yeah. I guess so. Or there's a lot of different...
Diet Dr. Pepper and regular Dr.
Coca-Cola
Pepper.
free, or whatever that... I just drink the regular thing.
Or remember that one time it was really gross with the ice cream, where you got me vanilla Turkey Hill ice cream that didn't have any lactose in it or something? That was so gross that I ate like one spoonful and we threw it out. Like, that's how gross it was.
Well, anyway, he just suddenly takes charge and they're all following him.
Yeah.
But what was the interesting thing about the movie? I don't know if you want me to bring it up yet or just want me to wait.
No, Safi, that's you're not just gonna like make the whole video about some book that you read that nobody cares about.
No, I'm not gonna say anything about a book.
Oh,
I'm
thank
just gonna
God.
say.
No, you do that later. We're not there yet at all.
Let me know when you are.
In any way. Oh, I'll let you know in the one thing that you're gonna add to the review.
Well, it wasn't in the first movie. It wasn't even mentioned. They didn't.
That's because in the first movie they were too busy dealing with Malachi.
Yeah.
Like
it's more about the. See, that was the thing. I would think in the first movie it's really more about the villains. That was the first one.
And another plot hole. There's lots of plot holes in the second movie. This is why I think the third one, they kind of just didn't care, I guess, is because there's a question of, that psychic girl from the first movie. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't she have seen the events from the second movie as well?
Like, yeah, she didn't get killed.
Like she,
right?
No.
So she should have been in the movie.
Yeah, she should have at least drawn a picture somewhere and then forgotten about it or something, because there's this one part where, and we haven't even talked about the quote-unquote main characters. So there's this dad and his son, and they don't like each other, and he works for a shitty gossip newspaper
like
thing.
Back then it would have been like the Inquirer.
Well, that's what I think they called it, like the World Inquirer or something.
Yeah. And what happened was he worked for a legitimate, I think it was Newsweek or something,
Yeah.
news publication, and he did something wrong where he got fired. And I really didn't get that, but it was bad enough to where he got fired, and that's why he needed a job, and he got a job with this rag. That's what you call
And
him.
I don't like his character.
No, he's not that great.
He's really uncharismatic. He's really stereotypical. He's got this like square shape to him. Like he's just like so. Ugh.
I've seen him before. He used to be in a lot of pop up and in all kinds of different series.
Well, he's not a terrible actor. It's
No.
just the character is so. Ugh.
He's not very, and in the way they, both of them, has a teenage son.
Yeah.
And the teenage son finds a girl who's very
No,
independent.
don't get there. Okay, you're going too fast, Safi.
They both, the two
Safi,
characters
you're
both
going
have a
too
relationship.
fast. We're not doing that yet.
I mean, it's just so.
We'll get to that. We'll get to
Okay.
that, Safi. You have to follow the review, not your timer or whatever.
Oh,
What do you have, a timer going or something?
no, I don't.
So the whole point of having a father and son is that there's like a difficult relationship between them, and so it's going to make him possibly join the Children of the Corn.
Which I never believed that he was going to.
Yeah,
Never.
like they kill people. Like I don't know why he wanted to just join them all of a sudden. So
Well, he was pretending, and that was a good way to stay alive. So
no, that's I guess what he was doing. But
he wasn't
once
even
again,
pretending.
we're not
for
there
it,
yet. We're
though.
not
Okay.
there yet. So you're just jumping ahead and just talking about something.
You brought it up, Marco.
No, I didn't. I said the whole point was that they have a turbulent relationship. I didn't say anything about what
They
happens
do, and
near the end of the movie.
And the guy in the black, of course, he wanted to take advantage of that.
Well, now what are you talking about? Are you just going to jump ahead again?
No, I just won't say anything.
Yeah, that'd probably be better. So it's really convenient that they come to town all of a sudden, and that it just happens to be a father and son who have a troublesome relationship. And it just so happens that the dad, it's so like just movie type stuff that you see where there's like these really queer coincidences that don't make any sense.
Well, it's kind of like a cliche.
Yeah. It's cliche and it's mediocre. And it starts off with a pretty interesting part where they meet like the head of the villains like right off the bat, but he's not a villain yet, I guess. And I thought that part was kind of cool, because if he had been a real villain all along, then that would have been actually like even better, that like he was hiding it at the beginning, but he wasn't. Like they have this part where the Isaac stand-in, he's in the cornfield, and he who walks behind the rows possesses him. And so he's not really in his right mind throughout the rest of the whole movie. So it's basically not even that kid who's the bad guy. And I thought that was a cop-out. And I thought another problem with this movie is that they didn't want to make the kids the bad guys at all. Like, they didn't even want any hint by the end of the movie that, like, oh, these kids they're actually evil. Like, no, they wanted to have all these cop-out excuses.
Well,
Like, oh, that one kid, he got possessed. Oh, they all got poisoned by some green crap on the corn. Like, they just wanted to have these cop-outs so that you wouldn't demonize these kids.
Well, that was another thing I really didn't understand. This mold business, and I know you didn't want me to, so I'm just not even going to bring up that fact. But they just, the newspaper guy or the rag writer and a Native American who lives there. He's one adult who kind of stays away from everybody.
Well, now you're just jumping ahead.
Oh, for God's sakes. I don't know what to say. Well,
And they can't even hear you either.
They find this corn.
Like you're all the way over there.
And there's mold on it. And Corey mentions it's toxic. But the thing is, you're talking about not wanting the kids to be blamed. It was almost like the corn didn't get harvested from the year before when they had all this horrible trouble. So the elders in the community were going to pawn this off and mix it with this year's corn so they would have a bigger yield and make more money. And even though they knew it was poison, so therefore the blame for badness would be not just for kids, but be for the adults. That's what
I thought that was queer.
I thought that was odd.
And you're jumping ahead, so
okay, well,
you're way far ahead. I don't know why you're just not like contributing to the review. Because you're just trying to get it over with, so you're just getting these points over with, so that then you can be
I don't want to forget them.
We don't have any.
I always forget.
Well, how could you forget where we're going through the whole movie?
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they go to this bed and breakfast, which you didn't even bring that up yet. Like you just talked all about the toxic corn. They go to the bed and breakfast,
and there's nowhere else to stay
with a
there's
woman.
No hotels.
And a woman runs the bed and breakfast, and right off the bat you can tell she's a slut. And she really is. Like, I mean, I guess this movie really isn't. I mean, this is Women's Day, right, Safi?
No, I don't know. I thought that was yesterday.
I think it's today, and you know this movie really isn't the best movie for women because all the female characters in this movie are sluts.
I don't know about that. They really don't. They're not very strong characters.
Like that's all they do is just kiss and have sex.
I don't know who the strong character in this movie is.
Well, yeah, there really is no strong character
not even for the villains, except for the guy in black.
No, except for the monster who's possessing the guy in black. The monster that we don't even see.
But I mean, I'm thinking back now. You're talking about you have those. There's two old ladies. They get killed, and then that's about it. I mean, and then the woman at the bed and breakfast.
Well, emphasis on the bed because she's a slut. They have this you know, they always used to have these types of scenes in these 80s horror movies, but they were shot well, and they actually, they're fine. This scene that they shot with this woman at the bed and breakfast, it was terrible. It just looked so gross, and it looks just so ew. It just looked like the type of scene that you'd expect in Children of the Corn. It didn't look good at all. They had this weird lighting. You had that guy who is the news reporter, and he's like a I don't know.
Well, I don't know why.
You got to admit that was a weird, terribly shot sex scene, Safi.
Well, I don't know. I could hardly see it. It was dark, and I had terrible lighting in the room. I finally had to shut the shade, and then I could actually see the movie better. But I don't know why they had to have the father and the bed and breakfast lady
and they get
pop
together
into bed. And I can understand the teenage thing because they're bored. They're both bored, and I can understand that. I've been in the situation
we haven't
where
gotten
it's been
to
boring,
that part yet.
but they're still bored, and so I can understand that. But the bed and breakfast lady and it didn't mean anything. You could just tell it was just so superficial, cliche.
But it wasn't superficial because it was gross. You couldn't there wasn't even any nudity at all. They were just all covered up by the blanket, and so it just seemed why did they even shoot this to begin with?
I know. Why?
If she's not going to show anything, then why would they even shoot it to begin with unless it had some huge significance to the plot.
It didn't have any significance to the plot except they're all alive.
Yeah.
Maybe it kept them alive.
Well, it's almost
Both
like
of them.
it's almost like it was like a discount or something. Like maybe she give them a discount.
I don't know.
I don't know. It was just so weird.
It was just like stuck in there, and it didn't belong. You know.
And maybe it's just because they didn't want to do it with the teenagers, even though I guess they were both adults in real life, so it wouldn't have even mattered.
I believe it because they didn't look like teenagers.
Yeah, they didn't look like teenagers at all.
They looked like they were in college.
And there was a really... And so what happens is the son, he wants to run away.
He wants to go back to New York. They're from New York, and this is Gatlin, Nebraska.
He really wants to go to New York for some reason.
Well, that's where they're from. Right?
So what, Safi? Like, why would you want to go to New York?
Because that's where they were from.
But why would you want to go to New York?
Well, it'd be better than being in that little podunk town where there's nothing going on.
False.
I could understand that completely.
That's false, Safi.
It's got Gatlin, Nebraska.
False.
Nebraska is really lots of corn.
Really?
Yes.
Why?
Those states are, I know.
What else do they have?
Not much.
What else?
I know if anybody out there's from Nebraska and you beg to differ, it used to be when I was in college, they had the best football team on the planet. Everybody was scared of Nebraska. But that is about it. Nobody ever talks about Nebraska wanting to go there for a vacation.
They do talk about Children of the Corn.
And that's, Children of the Corn. And it's very, very rural.
He wants to run away, and he meets a girl on the street, and she just rides by.
She's from another little town.
And
she's not from where all those kids were from, I guess. It's one of those things where they have now, today...
She almost seems like the town slut, because later on in the movie... the son goes up to Isaac's beta version, and he asks him, hey, do you know that girl? And he's like, oh yeah, everyone knows her. Like, he didn't say that, but he just made it seem like everyone knows her, and it's like, oh, she must be the town slut, because then they have another scene where he sees her, and I guess she's like swimming. And she's like in a bikini, and she's like getting a waterfall, and then all of a sudden she's like in love with the main character's son, and all of a sudden
he back with her.
Yeah,
they're having a little thing.
Yeah, and she wants him to take her to New York.
Of course, and that all actually makes sense to me.
Stupid.
Because I believe it. And
really,
the thing is, I don't know if they still do this, but what they used to do back in the 80s and 90s, I don't know if they're still doing it, but they have these little towns, they're very close together, and they all go to school together in one school. They're all bused to one place because they don't have enough people in one town to make up a school, so it's a combined school district thing. I don't know if they're still doing that, but I've seen that in Illinois. And so that's why she was from a different town, but they knew her because they put all the kids from each town. Because they all slept with her. No, they got all these kids from the different towns.
Well,
they all went to one. I just wanted to explain.
She was really easy.
I don't know what she was, but she was not of their. She was not of the mind they were. She was not under whatever the influence they were under. Like they were at all. She was completely free of that. So that was another thing. How did she, because she's from a different town, how did she escape that?
She's from the slut town.
Well, but it is interesting. They're all, every kid in that town, they're all following this Isaac .2. And she is not from there, and she could care less about any of them.
And his acting is really hilarious, Safi.
He looks familiar. I've seen him.
He looks like Keanu Reeves. and whenever he's mostly silent.
Yeah,
But
he
then,
doesn't say much.
But then as soon as he opens his mouth and he yells, he's just really hilarious, in my opinion. Like, you just can't take him seriously, and even if it was a real thing and that was a real video of seeing him, everyone would laugh at him. Like, no one would take him seriously. And so a lot of this movie is like just investigating the events of the first movie for some reason, because there doesn't seem to be any other investigation by anyone else for some reason.
It's just this new brag writer.
Even though like 50 people got killed or
50
something.
people, and that, I mean, they just had this year, what was it, 4 or 5 or 6 kids, like college age kids were murdered in Idaho. That was on the news for days and days and days all over the place. But this was 50, and this is that was Idaho. Idaho isn't exactly a populated state, and so here's this little town. 50 people get killed. That would be big news everywhere for days and days and days.
50 people.
Plus the fact this was another thing. I guess this would be called a plot hole. We said that the TV reporter and the other guy, cameraman, whatever, they were both killed right off the bat in the movie.
There's no investigation.
Nobody comes to look for them.
Yeah.
Nobody asks about them. I mean,
Nobody
what
cares.
happened? When they're from a major news station, wouldn't somebody miss them? And they're expecting this story.
They disappeared into the corn. They got sent to the cornfield.
That was bad.
I
didn't like that because I thought that just is not ever going to happen.
And then they had this old woman, and she was concerned about the kids being killers because, why wouldn't you be concerned about the children of the corn? And the kids actually come to her house, and they put her underneath the house, and then they drop the house on top of her, which I thought was a creative kill, but it wasn't.
That was weird. I don't know, how did they do that?
I don't know, and it wasn't really violent at all, so that was a little disappointing. All the kills in this movie were really disappointing because they were all so, like, PG-13 level kills.
Mild.
Yeah. They were not, like, bloody and gory and, the type of thing that you'd expect from a Children of the Corn
There is no
movie.
Blood and gore in this movie at all. Anything bad that happens, it's very mild. I mean, if that's bothered anybody watching movies like this, that's not going to bother you at all. I mean, it's almost like you don't even know if that really did happen. I guess the one thing with the woman in the wheel, her sister, I know I'm jumping ahead, but that was a quote kill.
I was going to talk about that one too.
Okay,
there was this other kill, and a lot of people say the movie's good just because of that one scene. And that's
that was
another
even mild, really.
That's another issue I think there is with this movie, is that a lot of people say, like, what do you expect? It's a Children of the Corn movie. Who cares? That's the type of attitude why horror is at such a bad place right now. Is because of, like, attitudes like that. Like saying, oh, it's Children of the Corn 2, what did you expect? Shakespeare? And it's like, no, I just expected it to be good. Like, is that too much to ask? Like, I want to watch a good movie. Like the first one, the third one, kind of, the fourth, but I still have to, we're going to review those too, so I don't want to get ahead like Safi. But they're in the town, and they're walking around, and all of a sudden they have, like, this remote control car, and they're chasing around this wheelchair woman with the car, and it's just like, ugh, this is like a cartoon.
But it was weird too, because they were all behind her, walking in front of everybody.
Yeah, everyone could see this go on.
Yeah, they were doing it right in front of everybody.
Yeah.
And she's almost like she didn't even know they were back there. and then she knew. That was not done well, and then it got to be that they weren't just controlling the car; the remote controlled her wheelchair. Now, how did it shift from controlling the car to her wheelchair? By magic? I mean, that was another thing. And, of course, they controlled her. Since they controlled her wheelchair, they got her into precarious positions in the street. And, of course, you know what's going to happen.
And it was pretty hilarious. I mean, this huge semi-truck runs into her, and then she flies into the window of a
bingo parlor.
A bingo, and it's just like, oh, God,
there was no blood.
This is corny.
It was almost like a
cartoon. It's like Looney Tunes.
What's the name of that?
Like Garfield.
Show. They did all these stunts, and you watched it. I can't.
No, Safi. Jackass has blood.
Oh, it does.
Sometimes, yes.
Okay,
Safi.
well, it was just so fake. I'll just put it that way.
Well, that Jackass is not fake at all, Safi.
Okay, well, this was a replication of that, but it was fake looking.
That's what makes it gross.
Well, it was very fake looking, and that's why I say it wasn't.
There was this really funny YouTube video series that, for some reason, like, you can't find it anywhere, and they did some sort of like a wheelchair comedy skit with Professor Xavier, where Magneto says, like, all Professor X has to do to defeat him is go up some stairs, and he can't go up the stairs because he's in a wheelchair or something. Like, they actually did that too in one of the X-Men movies. They did it in a Dark Phoenix, I believe, where, like, they did that same skit, I think, like kind of a variation.
Yeah, I think I've seen that.
But the kills were just really plain, boring kills. There wasn't any horror in the movie, I would say. There wasn't any suspense. There wasn't anything. It just felt like it could have been so much better. And it felt like they played it safe.
They really played it safe.
This is the definition of playing it safe.
It really is.
The definition, like...
You gotta wonder why.
I don't know.
To me, that's really odd, because, I mean, you would think that movie was today.
Yeah.
The way they were going on about everything.
Well, and because of the lack of kills, the lack of scares, the lack of... and then they had a jump scare, which was really weak.
I don't know, what was that?
The Native American guy, Red Bear, he surprises the main guy in the school, and they played like a loud noise, and they treated it like a stupid-ass modern-day jump scare type thing. And I thought,
I didn't even notice that.
That was like a modern day. This movie felt like Children of the Corn 2023.
Yeah.
So
and really radicalized. It's almost like this is what's happening in a certain other state. They're just sanitizing everything, and it doesn't have any meaning. It takes the meaning out of everything, and the joy and the creativity, and it's right there. And that movie's a perfect example. I mean, it's not really a horror movie.
No.
And
well, I would say, like, it did have some kills, so technically it is kind of a horror movie, but it's not really a true horror movie.
But there was a lot of plot holes, and it's just too bad, because I think that there's a lot wrong with it. I hate.
It had a good start, though.
Yeah,
it felt
did.
like
it was like it flew off. It just flew into what was going on. We weren't going to have this boring talking or building up to something. It was quick start.
It felt refreshing too.
Yeah, because this other stuff where they just kind of beat around the bush for a while, and they finally get into it, and it's a little gradual, and then it hits you, and then it disappears, and that's no good. But this really, like, this hits you right. And I was surprised. I still can't figure out. I mean, that whole thing with the news people, like I said, they get killed right off the bat.
Yeah.
And it's not by those kids. It's by the cornfield monster. And it's like a tornado built within the cornfield. That's what it was like with the red hues. Because they had this big cloud overhead that starts to form, and they're frightened. They try to leave. They can't get the car to start. And
I would say, though, that somebody, instead of making part 3, they should have taken the good ideas from this movie and made a movie that was like a remake with the ideas of this in the first one or something. Like, because there were good ideas in the movie and things where I felt like, oh, I wish they would have gone into that more, or I wish they would have done that more. Like, I thought it was kind of creepy at night, the way that the kids were still meeting up and everything. And you could just feel that, like, this peace wasn't going to last for long, and that they were definitely going to start killing again. And so it was just that part was kind of creepy. And
they did not really. There was another boy he was supposed to be like the Malachi.
Yeah, he's Mordecai. And he looks like fucking Gilbert from Leave It to Beaver.
Yeah, he isn't scary looking at all. He just looks like a doofus.
Yeah.
And but they didn't really emphasize the kids. They were almost like one-dimensional. They were very little shown about them. What they would do, they would show them smiling and laughing as they burned the church down, or
and it was goofy.
Went after somebody, and it was just
goofy
weird.
And dumb.
Yeah, it was almost like the director saying, "Okay, now everybody smile, like you love what's going on."
Well, no, it's like he didn't want the kids to really know that they're in a horror movie. Like, he didn't want them to think about, okay, kids, this is the scene where you have 10 people burned alive. Like, he probably was like, oh, you guys, you did something really bad, and it was a big boo-boo, and all the adults will have big boo-boos too. Like, that's what he probably said to these kid actors.
I don't know.
And I don't blame him. I want to know, though, like, what he said to the people when they shot that awful, terribly gross sex scene where it was like, that's one of those scenes where, like, you could just it was like, why did they do that? Like, why? Like, see, we never complain about sex scenes on the channel. We usually complain about, like, if they don't have any, or if it's, like, censored or something. But this is one of the few instances where I can definitively say what was up with that sex scene. Like,
I just think it was just so meaningless.
It was gross.
But it was just, to me, it was just meaningless.
Like,
and I thought, it's almost like they had to stick that in the movie. Why? I don't know. Because they thought it should be there, because...
But there wasn't even anything appealing. Like, they were covered up in a blanket.
Well,
they didn't even have any noise or anything. Like, it was so boring.
But see, the problem is they didn't even have any... when people get to know a character...
They didn't have any chemistry. They didn't have any...
chemistry.
It was like, just because it's a man and a woman, like...
I don't know, like, it was almost, it just was stuck in there, like they thought it was part of a
template?
Yeah, or, like a problem, like X plus Y equals Z, I just, and the kid thing I could understand. The boy, well, I don't know about falling in love, but like...
Well, he wasn't really in love with her.
No.
He was just like...
Bored.
They were bored.
And I can understand that. I've been through this personally. Not getting a boyfriend or something, but just the fact being in a small town, there's nothing to do, it's boring, you don't live there, you're visiting there.
Hey, then, you want someone like who to keep you company.
Oh, God. And this place was even worse. It wasn't even very much of a town. It was almost like a postage stamp in the desert. I mean, of corn, and and so she's been wanting to leave probably since the day she was born.
Yeah.
She's never wanted to be there.
And she's
he
like,
comes
okay,
in. He's from New York. And
this kid,
we can get out of here.
He's her one chance before she becomes a
Part of the corn group.
A single mother waitress that smokes cigarettes all day long. Like
she wasn't doing anything like that. She wasn't smoking cigarettes.
No, Safi, I said that that was her last chance before she would become that.
Yeah.
Like small town stereotype.
Well, she didn't want to be. I've just seen this, and I just that part really rings true. I mean, if you know anything about being in.
Yeah, that part was fun.
But it's still. And they really didn't even.
There was also a really weird part where he was supposedly going to be initiated into the Children of the Corn, and all of a sudden, they just cut off the scene. And it's the next day, and he's with the girl, and they're exploring, and it just felt like they cut the scene.
Like, did they do it? Yeah, that's what I was wondering too. Did he do it?
I don't know.
And I was thinking, I
guess not.
It. I don't believe that he was going to be a part of them ever. I think he was just playing along because he felt like he didn't have any choice, so he would look like he was, because he was, they're like, well, they blamed it on the corn.
Yeah, let's get to that finally, Safi, because I've been waiting for you to bring that up, and you just won't bring it up.
Okay, I've already said something about the Indian guy, Native American.
He's Red Bear, which sounds like a...
I never even heard that either. But that's a great name.
He said, "I'm Joseph Red Bear, and I am not gay."
He didn't say that.
But it sounds like a gay nickname, Safi. It sounds really hilarious.
No.
Yeah.
And so the newspaper, the rag guy, and him, they find he shows him this. The Native American shows him the barn. It's filled with corn. He says, "Oh my God, this is last year's corn." Then he looks at it and it has mold on it, which is aflatoxins, which is it'll kill you.
And it's green. And I thought, they did this movie Troll 2 where they had this green stuff all over the food and therefore you shouldn't eat it. And I thought, why didn't they just make it that mold from this movie? It would have made total sense. It would have been fine. And
so it's just, then they discover, and this has nothing to do with the kids. Well, it does on the second half of it. The first half of it is he thinks the adults are going to cut down this year's corn and mix it with this to get more profits. So that's why that sheriff, they're hiding something negative, what they're doing. They don't want them to tell anybody. And then about that. And then the kids, but the funny thing is, it has a dust or something on it that can cause you to hallucinate or have delusions or something. And that's why it could be especially bad for young kids.
And they made sure to emphasize that over and over and over again.
Yes, they did.
And that was the part, too, where in the second half of the movie, it almost felt like a nature documentary or something, because there was just so much exposition in the second half where they're talking about that toxin and whatever.
Aflatoxins.
That is the excuse for why the kids are in a cult, which I think is just the biggest load of bullshit I've ever heard.
Well, but I just thought it was interesting that they would do that.
Well, it's interesting because they didn't know what else to do, because they just wanted to play it safe and just have a couple of sex scenes that looked like trash.
I don't think they've
call it a day.
I don't think they've done anything like this except for the X-Files. Remember there was that one show when they had something in the food and it caused them to do something weird, negative.
See. I can't remember.
It was chicken, wasn't it? In the chicken?
No, that was
feed?
not. the chicken, they had a chicken episode where it was human meat that was in the chicken.
That's not that one.
And they were cannibals.
It was something like there was spray or something on the food to help it grow better.
Oh, that was one too. I can't remember.
It was the same kind of a premise.
Because we did that so long ago.
It was a long time ago. That's the only time when I've ever seen a show where something evil or terrible has happened, and it's because of something poisons in the food, or the growing of the food. And so I thought that was interesting that they went that way. But
it was just a cop out to make the kids not guilty of anything. It was just to make it.
They were the victims.
Yeah, and I didn't like that. I thought that was weak. I mean, it already wasn't scary.
Yeah, I'm going to look that up actually about what it's saying. I know that it can you can starve to death because it's no good.
No, don't do that.
Well, no, I'll look it up away from. But anyway, I had never seen that before, except for that one X-Files episode.
What ends up happening is that they're going to kill the slutty bed and breakfast woman, and they're going to kill the other love interest. So basically, both love interests are then damsels in distress, which, again, on Women's Day, we really didn't pick a movie with good female characters.
Yeah, but I've never seen the movie before. I didn't know what was.
Well, I didn't know either. What
was going to happen?
I wasn't expecting anything except for
all the women.
Corn.
Yeah, all the women in it were weak characters, and you had these two old ladies, and they were trying to just shout it out, but they were just too encumbered by their disabilities and their age.
Well, you could tell they're going to die too. I mean, there's always in these horror movies you'll have an old character
which isn't right.
Who really warns people and then he dies.
Well, okay, the exception to that is Bone Tomahawk, where
Safi, that's a modern movie.
Yeah, but the two weakest characters in the whole group.
Safi, why are you spoiling that movie?
But the thing is,
what if someone hasn't seen it?
I don't want to make people think that if you're old, you're going to get knocked off in the movie. That's just not true. Not in every movie.
It's most likely.
Yeah, it's probably most likely because they're at a disadvantage.
Like Gremlins, where they had the old women on the motorized chair, and they killed her, and there's tons of them.
Yeah, but I was just thinking, because we just saw that recently, and that old man, he didn't even really want him to come along. He wanted him to stay there, and the people who were the weakest people in the group.
I don't know why you're talking about Bone Tomahawk. Anyways,
I had to watch that again because somebody else was watching it.
That's irrelevant.
Okay, well, anyway.
I was saying those girls had to be saved.
Yeah.
And so eventually they have a tussle encounter in the cornfield. Well, it's like I know it's just not even worth explaining because it was just so mediocre. It was
very mild. I mean,
just
it's just
bland. The only interesting part was the son was debating whether or not he should help the main evil kid, because the main evil kid, the monster, actually goes out of his body when he figures out that the kid's about to die. And so there's kind of like an interesting debate over whether he should have helped and saved that kid. And it was kind of like that was like one of the only good moments of the second half of the movie, was like, oh, it's too bad that like that kid, he's been evil the whole movie because he was possessed. It's too bad that he can't be saved as well. And then the Native American, the not gay Red Bear guy, he dies, and then they burn him. They burn his body. They burn the evidence.
Well, they do. They make weird. A funeral pyre, which is what you do for like Hindu people, which I thought was really odd.
It was weird because it's like, aren't they going to tell the authorities, and like then the authorities would have to see, like, oh, he was killed this way. Like, like, are they really going to tell the authorities, like, well, he was Native American, so we figured it would be best to just burn him alive, to just burn his body and just put him in, like, a thing made out of corn.
Which is
like,
not what they did.
Just because he's Native American.
But it's not what they did. Well, Native Americans didn't have funeral. Well, maybe some groups did. There's lots of different groups. But from what I understand and from my experience doing archaeology, they did graves within a mound, like the mound builders, and or buried them in like a spot with a special area that's, you're not supposed to go into the area. I mean, this thing with the funeral pile, that's Hindu. That's not something that really freaked me out too.
They didn't even really mention the fact that, the woman at the bed and breakfast, the slut, she was supposed to be taking care of that Isaac 2.0, and she didn't even really care.
No, she didn't know what he was up to.
She didn't even
she was like
care
shocked,
at all.
like, what's going on? She was like,
what's going
what
on?
are you doing?
I was too
what
busy.
What are you doing? This is a small town.
I was
this
too
is like
busy.
a nothingville.
I was too busy having sex with that one guy who just came into town.
Yeah, really, it's true.
It's too bad, because that could have been a story as well. Like, that could have been part of the story, is that, she was genuinely, like, concerned for his well-being, but she wasn't.
I don't know what she was. She wasn't.
She was concerned with getting with that guy. But
that really, like I said, these characters were so one-dimensional. I mean, really, she was one-dimensional.
She was a good actress, though. Like, I thought she was likable.
Yeah, she was likable. That's true, but I thought she was very one-dimensional. And the fact the younger girl had more of a part than she did.
Yeah, the younger girl was much better.
She was more, I mean, she talked about what she wanted to do, about those people, not being a part of them.
Well, she just felt more real. Like, she just felt more like a real person instead of
she wasn't one-dimensional. She was more than one-dimensional. At least they made her like that. Why? I don't know. Why would they make the bed and breakfast woman so like she was a cartoon?
I did read, apparently, and now I don't want to talk about the sex scene again, but apparently, she refused to do the scene unless they could get it done in 3 shots. And I thought, if you have an actress who doesn't want to do that type of thing, then just don't do it. And just, just delete that from the script.
Because they didn't need it. It didn't add anything to the movie.
Well,
it was almost stupid, and it was very cliche, and it just wasn't, it just didn't fit. And it was meaningless.
I would say that, and then the movie ends and they all go to New York together so that they can get lost in New York with Kevin McAllister. So I would say this movie was extremely disappointing. I'm glad that as a kid I skipped this movie. I thought it was very mediocre and mild, and this is what not to do when you do a horror movie sequel. Like, there's so many good sequels. Psycho 2, Scream 2, Halloween 2, Friday the 13th 2, Jeepers Creepers 2, Nightmare on Elm Street 2 is better than this. Gremlins 2 is a masterpiece. So there's so many sequels that show you how to do a good sequel. This was not one of them, but unfortunately it had good ideas. And it's sad that it feels like this series, it has potential, but they're trapped under Stephen King's bad writing. They don't have any, because that's another thing. This was all based on a Stephen King short story, the first movie. Mm-hmm. So they might also be feeling restricted under his writing.
And I don't think he would have. He would not have been upset if they would have changed something or added. I really don't think he'd think that.
They just have to play it safe and just.
I just think that's a mistaken idea.
Well, what would you rate Children of the Corn to in terms of food?
Oh, that's really hard. I was gonna, God.
Oh, well, I'll
It's really
go
hard
first.
for me not to flunk it.
I'll go first since apparently you didn't think of one. So, for some reason, halfway through the movie, I started thinking about fruit roll-ups. Like, I don't know why. Well, like, all of a sudden, like, I just imagined the taste of eating a fruit roll-up. Like, I don't know why. And so I guess that's what I'm going to give the movie. So, and one of the things was that in grade school, it was like kind of a debate over which dessert you would get. Everyone always wanted to get the fruit roll-ups. And if you couldn't get that, you would get the fudge round, or you would get an oatmeal cream pie, or you would get like a frozen grape juice thing that was really like, ugh. Or a push pop. They had push pops too that were good.
Good.
And sometimes they would have the blue and green fruit roll-ups, and fruit roll-ups, they're really
still have those.
Yeah, but they're really not a great dessert because they're so like unsatisfying and they're so small. And like what kids used to do in school was they would stretch out the fruit roll-ups even longer, and because they wanted to have the illusion that they were eating something more substantial. And so like that's what you do. You take out the fruit roll-up and stretch it out and then eat the whole thing. And it tasted good at first, but then you're left with this really unsatisfying feeling of like, ugh, now what? Like, I just ate the whole dessert. That's what this movie was like, where it started off, it felt really refreshing, it felt like it was going to be really good, and it just quickly dwindled down into trash. Safi?
Yeah, I know.
From Safi and Marco Dish Out on Movies.
Okay, well...
The only movie review show on YouTube to review movies in terms of food.
Okay, well... I think this movie would be compared to having a cookie. It looks really good, and you forgot to put the sugar in it.
Really?
And it's just a plain... I mean, it wouldn't be edible at all. It wouldn't be good as a cracker. It wouldn't be good as a cookie because there's no sugar in it. Because you forgot the sugar, and that's what this movie reminds me of. I mean, even talking about it, I mean, it's very forgettable, and to me, it's sad because it's the second one, and it should be better, even better, but not this bad.
Yeah, like this was a huge downgrade from the first movie.
It is.
The first movie had blood and violence.
I hope they're not. I hope it wasn't because they were afraid of Stephen King, because I really think he's written so much stuff.
The music was terrible too. Like the music, it was like they were trying to copy the first movie's music, but doing a terrible job at it. And, the music is one of the highlights of the first movie.
The music isn't like a point.
Yeah.
It makes like a, what do you call it? An exclamation point.
The music in this, for me, I would say that the music was one of the worst parts of the second movie.
No, I just, you brought up that thing about International Women's Day, which, I don't know, I thought it might have been yesterday, but anyway, whatever. The women character, I mean, they were just, except for maybe the young girl.
To be fair, though, I'm kind of okay with it, because all we see is, like, movies with strong female characters, so
I know.
I'm fine with just seeing...
It's just the whole movie is just not good. And so that's what I would give it. I can't even... Today I had a Shamrock Shake. I decided to have one for the year. I'm not going to have any more. And it was so sugary.
Really?
I mean, it was like they poured a whole container of sugar in it. And I couldn't believe it. And I don't want to say that because that's just doesn't fit. So I would compare it to a cookie with no sugar in it at all. I mean, you want to have some sugar in it. It's shake. Or if you have a cookie, you want to have some sugar in it because that's what it is. It's a cookie. It's meant to have some sugar in it, but it's not. But it didn't have anything. I mean, just talking about it, everything was so mild.
Yeah.
And it was like, I don't know, well, who are they appeasing?
Old people or something?
No, that's
like
not right
old
either.
people.
It just, and it's just awful.
Well, honestly, Safi, this movie is the equivalent of like when you're a kid and you go to like the boring old person's house and there's nothing to do. Like, that's what this movie's like.
Well, that's not very nice.
Like,
Anyway,
you know.
Yeah, I
You
do
know. Who?
You know.
Who am I talking about?
No, I don't want to say. You're talking about somebody who's passed away, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to say. Because she was a really good person, and she was really a good grandmother and a good mother.
No, wait, I don't know what you're talking about. What?
Shirley?
No.
Well, you went there as a kid. So.
What was disappointing when we went over to her house was that, number one, I wanted to have macaroni and cheese, and you made some really gross homemade macaroni, and it tasted terrible. And so then I forced you to make boxed macaroni. But the worst, the worst part was the other time that we went there, because I probably should have just eaten the macaroni, but I really liked Kraft macaroni as a kid, and so I took that personally.
A lot of kids like that.
You said that I could go swimming over there, and I brought my swimsuit and I put it on and I wore it underneath my shirt, and then the guy, her husband, he took me out and he was showing me like some stream or something, or like in his yard or something, and you had made it seem like I was going to get to go swimming, and it was so disappointing because he like took me out there, and it's like, oh look, here's some water, here's like here's a stream, some little tiny fish. Like, it was just so anticlimactic.
They didn't have a swimming pool.
But you made it seem like there was like some swimming hole in the backyard or something, and there's just like this rectangular stream or something. Like, it was so like bad. It was just
Okay.
It was just such a letdown. Such a disappointment based on expectations.
Yeah, that's what this movie was. Anyway.
You want to go swimming.
Anyway, I can't talk anymore now. My throat's dry. But if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and become one of our subscribers. We appreciate comments and sharing opinions about different movies.
Safi, you sound like you're choking on corn.
If you've seen this movie, tell us what you think about it.
Well, we will be reviewing the rest of the series, so we can't wait to do that.
Okay, so goodbye, everybody.
Bye.